Think you know everything about the 1984 comedy that launched a franchise? From a psychiatric hospital doubling as a police academy, to Michael Jackson inspiring a character's voice, Police Academy harbors secrets stranger than fiction. This beloved comedy's production was filled with drunk actors, improvised props, celebrity cameos, and behind-the-scenes chaos that rival the on-screen antics. Prepare to discover the wild truth behind one of the 80s most unexpected hits. Fact 1. The Police Academy was actually a mental hospital. When you watch Police Academy and see those imposing red brick buildings where the recruits train, you're actually looking at a former psychiatric hospital that housed patients with mental illness for decades. The building that served as the Metropolitan Police Academy in the 1984 comedy was originally the Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital, located in Etobicoke, just outside Toronto, Canada. But the building's history goes back even further and gets much stranger. Before it became Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital in 1964, this same facility was known by a much more disturbing name, the Mimico Lunatic Asylum. The institution operated under various versions of this name from its early days until 1911, when society began moving away from such harsh terminology for mental health facilities. The filmmakers chose this location not for its psychiatric history, but because it perfectly captured the institutional look they needed for a police academy. The sprawling campus, with its authoritative architecture and dormitory-style buildings, provided an authentic backdrop for the story of misfit recruits trying to become police officers. The irony wasn't lost on some observers that a place once dedicated to treating people society considered crazy was now being used to film a comedy about supposedly incompetent police recruits. After filming wrapped, the building continued its transformation. The psychiatric hospital had already closed by 1979, and the site was primarily used for movie and television productions throughout the 1980s. In 1991, Humber College acquired the property and converted it into their Lakeshore campus, where it continues to serve students today. The specific buildings used in the film still exist and can be visited by fans. Building G served as Commandant Lassard's office, while buildings I, J, and K were used as the cadet barracks and dormitories. These buildings now overlook what has become the Australian football field on the college campus, giving the former asylum a much more positive purpose in its current incarnation as an educational institution. Fact 2. Director Hugh Wilson played an angry driver. Sometimes the most memorable moments in movies happen because of complete accidents behind the scenes, and Police Academy has one of the best examples of this kind of improvised filmmaking. Director Hugh Wilson ended up playing a small but notable role in his own movie when he had to step in as the angry driver that Moses Hightower crashes into during a driving lesson scene. But this casting decision wasn't planned at all. The scene was scheduled to be filmed at 2:30 in the morning, which is already an unusual time for shooting a movie. But the production team had their reasons for the late-night schedule. When the crew arrived on set and went to collect the actor who was supposed to play the angry driver, they discovered him completely passed out drunk in his trailer, unable to perform his role. With cameras ready to roll and the entire crew waiting, Wilson faced a choice between delaying the expensive night shoot or finding a quick replacement. Rather than waste time and money trying to find another actor at such a late hour, Wilson made the practical decision to step into the role himself. This meant that the director of the film also became one of its actors, playing the unfortunate motorist who gets caught up in Hightower's chaotic driving lesson. The scene shows Bubba Smith's character behind the wheel of a police car, with predictably disastrous results for anyone unlucky enough to be sharing the road with him. Wilson later shared this story as an example of how unpredictable movie production can be, especially when working with lower-budget comedies where backup plans often involve whoever happens to be available on set. The fact that audiences can watch the director getting crashed into by one of his own characters adds an extra layer of entertainment for fans who know the backstory. This wasn't the only time during Police Academy's production that last-minute changes had to be made. but it's certainly one of the most amusing examples of how creative problem-solving can lead to unexpected moments that make it into the final film. Fact 3. Hook's voice was based on Michael Jackson. One of the most distinctive and memorable characters in Police Academy is Laverne Hooks, the timid cadet with an incredibly soft, high-pitched voice that becomes louder and more assertive as she gains confidence throughout the film. What most fans don't realize is that actress Marion Ramsey created this iconic voice by doing an impression of Michael Jackson, and the inspiration came from an amazing coincidence that happened just hours before her audition. Ramsey was performing in a stage production of Little Shop of Horrors when Michael Jackson unexpectedly showed up backstage to meet the cast after the show. This was during the height of Jackson's fame in the early 1980s. So meeting the King of Pop was an incredible and unexpected experience for any performer. The encounter happened the night before Ramsey was scheduled to audition for Police Academy, and she had no idea at the time how much this chance meeting would influence her career. When Ramsey read the script description for Hooks the next day, she noticed that the character was described as someone who spoke with a little voice. Drawing inspiration from her recent encounter with Jackson, she decided to base Hooks's voice on the pop star's distinctive, soft, breathy speaking style. Ramsey later explained that while she mimicked Jackson's voice, all the timid mannerisms and nervous gestures that made Hooks so endearing were her own creative additions to the character. The voice work became so convincing that it created some unexpected challenges during filming. Ramsey recalled that when Hooks finally finds her confidence and shouts the line, "Don't move, dirtbag!" the sound technicians were completely caught off guard because they had become used to recording her extremely quiet voice throughout the production. They were so surprised by the sudden volume that they had to adjust their equipment to handle the dramatic change in her character's vocal delivery. This chance encounter with one of the world's biggest music stars led to the creation of one of comedy's most beloved characters, proving that sometimes the best creative inspiration comes from the most unexpected sources. Fact 4. Harris's stick wasn't in the original script. Lieutenant Harris's swagger stick became one of the most recognizable props in Police Academy, with G.W. Bailey's character constantly twirling, pointing, and wielding it as a symbol of his authority and intimidation tactics throughout the film. However, this iconic piece of Harris's character wasn't something the writers or director had planned from the beginning, and it only became part of the movie through a completely random act of generosity from someone who wasn't even supposed to be in front of the camera. The stick actually belonged to an extra who was working on the Police Academy set during filming. This unnamed background performer had brought the military-style swagger stick as part of his own costume or personal collection. But rather than keeping it for himself, he decided to give it to G.W. Bailey as a gift. The extra apparently thought the prop would work well with Bailey's character and handed it over without any expectation that it would become such a central part of the performance. Bailey immediately saw the potential in this unexpected prop and began incorporating it into his portrayal of the strict, by-the-book Lieutenant Harris. The stick became a perfect physical representation of Harris's military bearing and his obsession with rules and discipline. Bailey used it to point at cadets during lectures, tap it against his palm when he was thinking, and generally treat it as an extension of his authoritative personality. What makes this story even more remarkable is how seamlessly the stick became integrated into Harris's character development throughout the film. Viewers watching Police Academy today would never guess that this crucial prop was a last-minute addition rather than something carefully planned by the screenwriters and prop department. The stick appears in so many of Harris's scenes that it feels completely natural and essential to who the character is. This spontaneous addition to the film shows how collaborative movie-making can be, with contributions coming from unexpected sources that end up enhancing the final product in ways nobody could have anticipated during the planning stages. Fact 5. The Blue Oyster Bar was a real Toronto music venue. The Blue Oyster Bar scenes in Police Academy, where unsuspecting characters get tricked into entering what appears to be a leather-clad biker bar, were actually filmed at one of Toronto's most beloved and historic music venues. The real location was called the Silver Dollar Room, and it had absolutely nothing to do with the fictional gay bar portrayed in the movie, serving instead as a legendary blues and bluegrass venue that hosted live music for decades. The Silver Dollar Room was located at 486 Spadina Avenue in Toronto, occupying the ground floor of the famous old Hotel Waverly. This venue had been a cornerstone of Toronto's music scene since 1958, welcoming countless musicians and music lovers through its doors for over half a century. The club was known for featuring authentic blues, country, and bluegrass acts, making it a completely different kind of establishment from what moviegoers saw on screen during the Police Academy scenes. When the filmmakers needed a location that could convincingly serve as the Blue Oyster Bar, they chose the Silver Dollar Room purely for its physical layout and atmosphere, not because of any connection to the fictional bar's portrayed clientele. The venue's intimate setting, with its bar area, stage space, and dim lighting, provided the perfect backdrop for the comedic scenes where characters like Blanks and Copeland find themselves unexpectedly dancing to the song El Bimbo with leather-clad patrons. The Silver Dollar Room continued operating as a music venue for many years after Police Academy was filmed, maintaining its reputation as an important part of Toronto's cultural landscape. However, this piece of movie history came to an end in 2018 when both the Silver Dollar Room and the historic Hotel Waverly were demolished to make way for new development. In a nod to the venue's cultural significance, developers promised to rebuild the Silver Dollar Room exactly as it was in the new construction project. The venue's connection to Police Academy had become part of its legacy, alongside its more substantial role in Toronto's music history. Fact 6. Michael Winslow voiced all Academy announcements. Michael Winslow's incredible vocal abilities extended far beyond his memorable performance as Larval Jones, the sound effects wizard who could mimic everything from helicopters to machine guns using only his voice. What most viewers don't realize is that Winslow was actually performing double duty throughout Police Academy, providing not only his character's amazing sound effects, but also serving as the voice of the Academy itself through every public address announcement heard over the loudspeakers. Throughout the film, audiences hear various announcements being made over the Academy's PA system, calling cadets to different activities, providing schedule updates, and delivering other institutional messages that help establish the military-style atmosphere of the police training facility. These announcements might seem like standard background audio that any voice actor could have recorded, but the filmmakers decided to take advantage of Winslow's remarkable vocal range and versatility by having him handle this additional responsibility. This decision made perfect sense from both a practical and creative standpoint, since Winslow had already demonstrated his ability to dramatically alter his voice for different sound effects throughout the movie. His natural talent for vocal manipulation meant he could easily create the kind of official, authoritative tone needed for institutional announcements, while also maintaining consistency with the overall sound design of the film. The choice to use Winslow for these announcements also added an extra layer of his presence throughout the movie, even in scenes where his character Jones wasn't physically appearing on screen. Audiences were hearing his voice work in multiple contexts without necessarily realizing it, which created a subtle but constant reminder of the vocal talents that made him such a standout performer in the ensemble cast. This behind-the-scenes detail demonstrates how filmmakers often find creative ways to maximize the unique skills of their cast members, especially when working with performers who have specialized abilities like Winslow's incredible range of vocal sound effects. The Academy announcements became just another showcase for his remarkable talents, even though most viewers never knew they were hearing the same person who played Jones. Fact 7. Leslie Easterbrook scared producers during her audition. Leslie Easterbrook's transformation into the tough, intimidating Sergeant Callahan was so convincing during her audition that she literally frightened the people who were supposed to be evaluating her performance. The actress threw herself so completely into the aggressive, sexually confident character that the director and producer physically recoiled from her intensity, pushing their chairs backward to get away from her commanding presence in the audition room. This reaction was particularly surprising because Easterbrook had never played anything like Sergeant Callahan before in her career. She later explained that portraying someone intimidating and sexually aggressive was completely foreign to her previous acting experience, and she had serious doubts about whether she could pull off such a dramatically different type of role. The character of Callahan was written as a physically imposing, no-nonsense instructor who commanded respect through both her authority and her bold sexuality, which was quite a departure from Easterbrook's usual casting. When she saw the director and producer backing away from her during the audition, Easterbrook immediately assumed she had made a terrible mistake and ruined her chances of getting the part. She left the audition room feeling upset and convinced that her overly intense performance had scared off the filmmakers rather than impressed them. The physical reaction from the men in the room seemed like clear evidence that she had misunderstood what they were looking for in the character. However, what Easterbrook interpreted as rejection was actually exactly the response the filmmakers were hoping to see. They wanted someone who could genuinely embody Callahan's intimidating presence and make audiences believe that this character could command a room full of police cadets through sheer force of personality. Easterbrook's ability to project that kind of authority so convincingly that it made grown men uncomfortable proved she was perfect for the role. The actress didn't get to read the actual script until after she had already been cast, which meant she had to create her interpretation of Callahan based solely on the character description and her own instincts about what the role required. Fact 8. The movie was inspired by real incompetent cops. The entire concept for Police Academy came from producer Paul Maslansky, witnessing an embarrassing display of police incompetence during the production of another major film, and the real-life scene he observed was almost too ridiculous to believe. Maslansky was working on The Right Stuff in 1983 when a group of police cadets arrived to help with crowd control for a street scene. But instead of providing professional assistance, they delivered an unintentional comedy show that would inspire one of the biggest movie franchises of the 1980s. When the cadets piled out of their buses to take their assigned positions, Maslansky noticed they were an incredibly diverse group that included men, women, people of different heights, ages, and ethnic backgrounds. This diversity wasn't the problem, but their complete inability to handle their basic responsibilities certainly was. The cadets proved to be what Maslansky later described as fumblingly inept at the simple task of keeping members of the public away from the movie set. The situation became even more absurd when Maslansky witnessed an exasperated superior officer with a very red face loudly chewing out two particularly incompetent recruits. One was a woman weighing over 200 pounds, and the other was a flabby man who appeared to be well over 50 years old. Both recruits were desperately trying to rationalize and explain away their obvious incompetence, while their supervisor grew more frustrated with their poor performance. Maslansky found the entire scene so hilariously ridiculous that he asked the sergeant a question that would eventually become the foundation of Police Academy. He inquired whether these bumbling recruits were really going to become San Francisco's finest police officers. The sergeant explained that they had an equal opportunity hiring policy that required them to accept anyone who applied to the academy for training, but added that they could flunk them out within 2 weeks. This response sparked Maslansky's imagination, and he began wondering what would happen if some of these incompetent recruits actually didn't want to be flunked out. That same night, he wrote a 2-page treatment for what would become Police Academy and gave it to executive producer Alan Ladd Jr., who immediately loved the concept. Fact 9. Tony Hawk was fired as David Spade's stunt double. Future skateboarding legend Tony Hawk was only 17 years old when he got hired to work as David Spade's stunt double for Police Academy 4. Citizens on Patrol in 1987, but his brief Hollywood career came to an abrupt end thanks to the unpredictable timing of teenage growth spurts. Hawk had originally auditioned for a speaking role in the film but didn't get the part, though the producers were so impressed with his skateboarding skills that they decided to hire him as Spade's double for the complex skating sequences. The casting made perfect sense because both Hawk and Spade were what skateboarders call goofy-footed, meaning they rode with their right foot forward instead of their left. This matching stance was crucial for creating believable footage where audiences would think they were watching Spade perform incredible skateboarding tricks when it was actually the teenage prodigy doing the dangerous stunts. However, between the time Hawk was hired and when the actual filming began in Toronto, he experienced a significant growth spurt that made him noticeably taller than Spade. For the first week of production, the crew tried to make it work by having legendary skateboard filmmaker Stacy Peralta constantly tell Hawk to stay low during his stunt sequences. Despite Hawk's best efforts to crouch and minimize his height difference, the illusion just wasn't convincing enough for the cameras. Hawk later recalled hearing the director complain that he's a pretty good skater, but he's a bad stunt double, which sealed his fate on the production. Rather than making a big scene about firing him, the production team quietly sent the teenager home after realizing the height difference was too obvious to ignore. Hawk was replaced by another professional skateboarder named Chris Miller, though this created its own continuity problems since Miller wasn't goofy-footed like Spade, causing the character's skating stance to mysteriously change throughout the film. Despite getting fired, Hawk still ended up with a credit in the movie as skateboarder and learned valuable lessons about the film industry, including how stunt performers could earn extra money by making their work look more difficult than it actually was. Fact 9. Tony Hawk was fired as David Spade's stunt double. Future skateboarding legend Tony Hawk was only 17 years old when he got hired to work as David Spade's stunt double for Police Academy 4. Citizens on Patrol in 1987, but his brief Hollywood career came to an abrupt end thanks to the unpredictable timing of teenage growth spurts. Hawk had originally auditioned for a speaking role in the film but didn't get the part, though the producers were so impressed with his skateboarding skills that they decided to hire him as Spade's double for the complex skating sequences. The casting made perfect sense because both Hawk and Spade were what skateboarders call goofy-footed, meaning they rode with their right foot forward instead of their left. This matching stance was crucial for creating believable footage where audiences would think they were watching Spade perform incredible skateboarding tricks when it was actually the teenage prodigy doing the dangerous stunts. However, between the time Hawk was hired and when the actual filming began in Toronto, he experienced a significant growth spurt that made him noticeably taller than Spade. For the first week of production, the crew tried to make it work by having legendary skateboard filmmaker Stacy Peralta constantly tell Hawk to stay low during his stunt sequences. Despite Hawk's best efforts to crouch and minimize his height difference, the illusion just wasn't convincing enough for the cameras. Hawk later recalled hearing the director complain that he's a pretty good skater, but he's a bad stunt double, which sealed his fate on the production. Rather than making a big scene about firing him, the production team quietly sent the teenager home after realizing the height difference was too obvious to ignore. Hawk was replaced by another professional skateboarder named Chris Miller, though this created its own continuity problems since Miller wasn't goofy-footed like Spade, causing the character's skating stance to mysteriously change throughout the film. Despite getting fired, Hawk still ended up with a credit in the movie as skateboarder and learned valuable lessons about the film industry, including how stunt performers could earn extra money by making their work look more difficult than it actually was. Fact 10. Bubba Smith hid his tooth gap. Bubba Smith's distinctive gap-toothed smile became one of Moses Hightower's most memorable physical characteristics throughout the Police Academy series. But this recognizable feature almost never made it into the films because the former NFL star was extremely self-conscious about his teeth. During filming of a crucial rooftop scene where Harris and Mahoney are being held hostage, director Hugh Wilson asked Smith to open his mouth slightly and make his cheeks and lips quiver while delivering a specific line, but Smith repeatedly refused to comply with the direction. Wilson became increasingly frustrated as he tried to get the shot he wanted, but Smith kept his mouth tightly closed and wouldn't explain why he was resisting such a simple acting direction. The scene required Smith to say the line, "I want to watch you off these pigs," and Wilson felt that having Hightower's mouth slightly open would add the right emotional expression to the moment. However, Smith continued to keep his lips pressed together, making it difficult to achieve the dramatic effect the director was looking for. Finally, Wilson asked Smith directly why he wouldn't open his mouth for the scene, and Smith reluctantly admitted that he was embarrassed about a gap between his front teeth. He had been trying to hide this feature throughout filming because he thought it looked unprofessional or unattractive, especially since he was transitioning from his successful football career into acting and wanted to make a good impression in his new profession. When Wilson heard Smith's explanation, he started laughing and immediately showed Smith his own front teeth, which had a gap that was actually twice as large as Smith's. This moment of shared vulnerability broke the tension on set and helped Smith realize that his dental feature wasn't something to be ashamed of. Wilson encouraged him to try the scene with his mouth open, and when Smith finally agreed, his gap-toothed expression became an instant hit with the cast and crew. The gap ended up becoming one of Hightower's most endearing and recognizable traits, contributing to the character's gentle giant personality and making Smith smile a trademark element that fans associated with the beloved character throughout the entire franchise. Fact 11. The haircut scene was filmed out of order. One of the most memorable scenes in Police Academy shows the antagonistic cadets Blanks and Copeland getting their heads completely shaved as part of their Police Academy training, but this scene created a significant continuity challenge for the filmmakers because it was shot completely out of sequence from the rest of the movie. The production schedule required the head-shaving scene to be filmed before many of the earlier scenes where Blanks and Copeland first arrive at the academy and begin their training with full heads of hair. This scheduling decision meant that actors Brant von Hoffman and Scott Thompson had to have their hair completely removed for the shaving scene, leaving them essentially bald for the remainder of the filming process. However, the movie's storyline required them to appear with normal hair in scenes that were supposed to take place before the haircut incident, creating a major visual continuity problem that needed to be solved. The solution was to have both actors wear wigs whenever they filmed scenes that were supposed to show them earlier in their academy training. This meant that in all the scenes where audiences see Blanks and Copeland first entering the academy, meeting their fellow cadets, and going through their initial training exercises, both actors are actually wearing hairpieces to cover their shaved heads. The wig work had to be convincing enough that audiences wouldn't notice the difference between the actors' real hair and their artificial hair, which required skilled makeup and hair departments to create realistic-looking pieces that matched their original hairstyles. The wigs also had to withstand the physical demands of filming action scenes and comedy sequences without looking obviously fake or shifting out of place. This behind-the-scenes challenge demonstrates how film production schedules don't always align with the chronological order of a movie's story, forcing creative teams to find practical solutions for maintaining visual consistency. The fact that most viewers never notice the wig work in Police Academy shows how successfully the hair and makeup teams handled this tricky situation, allowing the filmmakers to shoot scenes in whatever order was most convenient for the production schedule, while maintaining the illusion of natural story progression. Fact 12. Marion Ramsey was supposed to wear a fat suit. The character of Laverne Hooks was originally conceived with a dramatic physical transformation storyline that would have completely changed how audiences perceived her character development throughout Police Academy. Marion Ramsey was asked to wear a fat suit for her role as the timid cadet, with the filmmakers planning to show Hooks gradually losing weight as she progressed through the rigorous Police Academy training program and gained confidence in herself. The concept was designed to mirror Hooks' emotional journey from a shy, insecure recruit to a more assertive and capable police officer by showing a corresponding physical transformation. The idea was that the demanding boot camp-style training would render her slim and fit by the end of the film, creating a visual representation of her personal growth and newfound strength. This would have added an extra layer to her character arc, showing not just mental and emotional development but also physical changes that came from the Academy's challenging requirements. However, the ambitious transformation sequence proved to be more complicated and time-consuming than the production team had anticipated. The logistics of filming scenes that showed Hooks at different stages of weight loss required careful planning and scheduling, as well as multiple versions of costumes and potentially different fat suit configurations to show the gradual change. As the filming schedule became more compressed and deadlines approached, the filmmakers realized they didn't have enough time to properly execute this subplot. Due to these time constraints, the scene that was supposed to show Hooks after her dramatic weight loss was completely removed from the final cut of the film. By the time work began on Police Academy 2, the producers had changed their minds entirely about this character element. They decided to have Ramsey continue wearing the fat suit in the sequel, believing that keeping Hooks as a more physically vulnerable character would help audiences feel more sympathetic toward her and make her eventual moments of strength and bravery even more impactful. Interestingly, a brief shot of the slim version of Hooks actually remains in the original Police Academy film as a close-up during the graduates' final march ceremony, where Ramsey appears without the fat suit, creating a small continuity inconsistency that most viewers never notice. Fact 13. A stuck door became comedy gold. Sometimes the best comedy moments happen completely by accident, and Police Academy contains a perfect example of how real-world technical problems can become memorable movie magic when the cameras are rolling. During the climactic citywide riot scene, Marion Ramsey's character Hooks delivers the line, "I'll bet there's a back door to this place," while the cadets are trapped inside a building and looking for an escape route. But what happened next was entirely unscripted and unplanned. When Ramsey tried to open the door she was referring to, it turned out to be genuinely jammed and wouldn't budge no matter how hard she pulled on it. This wasn't part of the script or a planned gag, but rather a real technical problem with the door that created an unexpected obstacle during filming. Instead of stopping the scene to fix the door or move to a different location, Ramsey stayed in character and kept struggling with the stubborn door, determined to get it open so the scene could continue. The struggle went on for several attempts as Ramsey pulled, pushed, and wrestled with the door while the cameras kept rolling. Her increasingly frantic efforts to open what should have been a simple exit created a naturally funny moment that perfectly matched Hooks's character development, showing her determination to solve problems even when things don't go according to plan. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of effort, Ramsey succeeded in forcing the door open, and the scene could proceed as originally intended. Rather than editing out this unplanned sequence or reshooting the scene with a properly functioning door, the filmmakers recognized that Ramsey's genuine struggle had created comedy gold that worked perfectly within the context of the movie. They decided to keep the entire door-fighting sequence in the final cut, but enhanced its comedic impact by speeding up the footage to make Ramsey's efforts look even more frantic and determined. This decision turned a potential production problem into one of the film's funniest unscripted moments, demonstrating how sometimes the best comedy comes from real situations rather than carefully planned gags. The sped-up footage of Hooks battling the stubborn door became a memorable highlight that audiences still laugh at today. Fact 14. Steve Guttenberg wore his real police officer father's shirt. Steve Guttenberg brought a genuine piece of police history to his Police Academy audition by wearing an authentic uniform shirt that belonged to his father, Stanley Guttenberg, who served as a real New York City police officer. This wasn't just a costume choice or a lucky coincidence, but rather a meaningful connection between the actor's family background and the role he was hoping to land in what would become his most famous movie franchise. The decision to wear his father's actual NYPD shirt demonstrated Guttenberg's personal connection to law enforcement and showed that his interest in playing Carrie Mahoney went beyond just landing another acting job. having a father who worked as a police officer gave Guttenberg first-hand knowledge of police culture, the challenges of law enforcement work, and the kind of personality traits that would be realistic for someone entering the police academy, even if his character was doing so reluctantly. Stanley Guttenberg's career with the New York City Police Department provided his son with insights into the real world of policing that most actors auditioning for the role wouldn't have possessed. This background knowledge likely helped Steve Guttenberg understand the nuances of police academy training, the hierarchical structure of police departments, and the kind of attitudes and behaviors that would be authentic for his character's journey from reluctant recruit to dedicated officer. The choice to wear his father's uniform shirt to the audition also showed respect for the police profession, even though Police Academy was clearly intended as a comedy that would poke fun at law enforcement training. By incorporating this real piece of police history into his audition outfit, Guttenberg demonstrated that his approach to the role would balance humor with genuine appreciation for the work that police officers do. This family connection to law enforcement added an extra layer of authenticity to Guttenberg's portrayal of Mahoney throughout the film series. While the movies were obviously exaggerated comedies filled with unrealistic situations and characters, having an actor whose father actually walked the beat as an NYPD officer brought a subtle but meaningful foundation of real police experience to the franchise's leading role. Fact 15. The film almost didn't get made due to rewrites. Police Academy came dangerously close to never reaching movie theaters because of a creative disagreement over how crude and raunchy the comedy should be, with the film's future hanging in the balance when studio executives rejected what they considered an overly sanitized version of the script. Director Hugh Wilson and producer Paul Maslansky had taken the original screenplay by writers Neil Israel and Pat Proft and significantly toned down many of the more explicit and offensive jokes, believing that a cleaner approach would create better comedy and reach a wider audience. Wilson was particularly uncomfortable with certain scenes that he felt relied too heavily on cheap shock value rather than genuine humor. He wanted to reduce what he called the sleaze and focus on character-driven comedy that would have more lasting appeal than gratuitous sexual content and crude sight gags. This philosophy led Wilson and Maslansky to rewrite substantial portions of the script, removing or modifying many of the raunchier elements that the original writers had included. However, when they submitted their cleaned-up version to executives at the Ladd Company, the response was immediate rejection. The studio felt that Wilson and Maslansky had removed too much of what made the original script funny and marketable, essentially turning a potentially successful rated comedy into something too bland to attract the target audience. The project was nearly shelved entirely at this point, with executives expressing serious doubts about whether the revised version would be commercially viable. Faced with the possibility of losing the entire project, Wilson and Maslansky were forced to compromise on their vision for a more refined comedy. They went back through the original Israel and Proft script and restored dozens of the crude gags and explicit scenes that they had initially removed. Only after putting back these elements did the studio give the project the green light to move forward into production. According to the original writers, about 20 of the major comedic elements in the final film remained from their version, proving that the cruder humor was considered essential to the movie's commercial appeal. This behind-the-scenes struggle demonstrates how creative differences between filmmakers and studios can nearly derail major projects, even when everyone involved wants the movie to succeed.